So thank you for joining us today. This is a technical assistance webinar all about our Housing Trust Fund application, the application that is due in a couple weeks. So the agenda will give an overview of the Housing Trust Fund. We'll go over the application itself, do some tips and tricks, resources, and Q&A at the end. And like I said, I'm recording to put this on the webinar, but we'll stop the recording at the Q&A part of it. So what is our Housing Trust Fund? This is not to be confused with the federal Housing Trust Fund, the one that's run by HUD. This Housing Trust Fund is administered by the El Paso County Housing Authority. It is all local. It was established about 30 years ago with bond revenues that the county decided that they wanted to loan out to the community to help create affordable housing. So it's those old bond proceeds. They did a housing trust fund and it's all administered by the housing authority. The goal of the Housing Trust Fund is to promote suitable living environments for everybody in our county. And it's a non-traditional structure for that housing authority. We don't own or manage anything here at El Paso County. If you want to speak to somebody about public housing, you know, the vouchers and Section 8 and all of that, that's the Colorado Springs Housing Authority. We don't do any of that here at the El Paso County Housing Authority. This Housing Trust Fund is a revolving loan fund. We do not get money from federal resources at all. It's not tax money. We don't get any infusions of anything other than our Board of County Commissioners did give the Housing Trust Fund a $2 million bunch of money. It was the COVID funds. That was about 2022, I believe. But other than that, we don't get any other funding coming into this other than what the fund revolves itself. So we can't do grants with this. It has to be some kind of a loan. And we'll talk about that in a minute. There's 2 application dates for the Housing Trust Fund. The one that's coming up is May 1st. We also have one on November 1st, and it's a competitive process. So we'll talk about that in a second as well. Our Housing Trust Fund, they like to say that F part of it is for flexibility. So it's for flexible project types. You can do whatever kind of affordable housing meets your needs. We're looking for initial home ownership, homelessness prevention, special needs housing, rehab. But typically those things go through CDBG instead, but if you can show that there's that extra need in our community, they'll look at it for Housing Trust Fund as well. It's also flexible usage. So all those other federal sources like that LIHTC and private activity bonds, those things have to be used for special parts of a development. Whereas this Housing Trust Fund is very flexible. We don't tell you what you have to use it on or how it has to be used or when it has to be used. There's no reporting requirements on it or anything like that. It's also flexible in terms of what you get. So the loans themselves are between 200 and 500,000 these days, depending on the needs of the development. We had one development last year or the year before that only needed 410,000. So that's all they asked for. So it's just based on what you need. And the interest rates are usually 2 to 3%, but we've had some other things than that as well. Again, it's based on the need. And an amortized repayment is preferred. So we would really prefer that money to be paid back every year. But there's other things going on as well. We've had some developments that say we can't possibly pay you back for a couple of years, and then we'll start the payments. Or they would like to do, instead of an annual payment, they want to do a payment every 6 months. There's all kinds of flexibility with that as well. The things that our board likes to focus on, the location. We would really like projects out in more rural areas, but we understand how difficult that is. We definitely like to look at that location though. If we can get some stuff up north, we like that. There's not that much affordable housing up on the north end of town. It doesn't have to be inside city of Colorado or outside City of Colorado Springs limits. It's anywhere in El Paso County, but they do like those outlying areas when it comes to the projects. The timeline is very important to our board. They like to see projects that are coming out of the ground within the next year. So has to be timed pretty good with this application process since we only do the applications twice a year. They want to see that they're putting their money towards something that's actually moving. We've had some problems lately. I'm sure everybody's aware of all the neighbors that are complaining about different projects and doing lawsuits and all kinds of things to stall a project. We've had a lot of problems with that. And when something gets stalled like that, then our funds are tied up. It's not really helping anybody. It's tied up waiting for that development to start. So they're looking at those things as well. Income targeting, of course, they're interested in helping those low to moderate income families. So they're looking for those things. Unit counts and mixes, they like to see developments that have more bedrooms. That's a big thing these days for the larger families. But then we also like to see senior residences that probably only have one bedroom. So they want to see that unit mix. They want to see a completed financial stack. Our board really focuses on that. We have a lady on the board who is a retired banker, so she really pours over that financial stack closely. They want to see things that are ready to go, not something that you're applying maybe for those tax credits and it'll take a year to find out if you've received them. They want something that's ready to go. And of course, they want to see their repayment. This, again, is a revolving loan fund. We have to have that money coming back in. So they want to see that clearly shown on the pro forma. And I'll show you where that comes in. And of course, they want to know if there's any zoning issues. I already talked about the neighbors that are doing lots of complaints about zoning changes in our community. So they want to see that. They want to make sure that a project is ready to go. They don't have to go through zoning before getting the development off the ground. They want to see if there's any benefits beyond housing. So have you partnered with anybody to provide services for the development? They want to see those kind of things. And again, those partnerships and collaborations. So we've had a lot of churches that are partnering with development companies to do projects. We've got nonprofits that are partnering with churches. We've got all sorts of kinds of partnerships that are going on these days, and they like to see that stuff too. It's really good for our community. Our timeline for this spring, May 1st is when the applications are due by 5 p.m. We have an El Paso County Housing Authority meeting on May 8th. They will go over those applications. And at that point, they're going to decide if they want to hear from the applicants in person. So sometime in May, right after that meeting, I will be sending out letters to the organizations that we would like to come and present. And then presentations would be on June 12th would be the presentations. But materials are required to me by June 5th so that I can prepare the packets for the board. Again, they meet on June 12th. That'll be when presentations are heard. So we invite all the presenters to come here in person, or if you're not in town, you can do the virtual as well. Either way works for us. And then the end of June is when we'll send out the commitment letter. Usually the commitment letter's good for a year. That should not say December. That should say after the June meeting is when that letter would come out. After that, whoever's developing the project gets to work closely with me and our legal representatives from QTAC Rock to go over the documents, to make sure everything gets signed. Then at closing, I deliver a cashier's check to the title company. Our board does not believe in wire transfers, so we usually work out some kind of a system where I can get a cashier's check to the title company. A little bit about the commitment letters. That commitment letter sent to all the projects that are approved. And it gives the details about the project. So it will say right in that letter the number of units and the income levels of those units that we expect to see. That's what you applied for. That's what we expect to see. It'll also say the loan term, so the interest rate and the amortization that you asked for and that was approved, and then any conditions. So over here at the side, we've got some conditions that have come up. So of course, we want to see that there's sufficient funding to do the project, that a loan didn't fall through or tax credits weren't approved or something. We want to make sure that there's sufficient funding. Completions of a satisfactory review of the value of the property. So of course we want to see an appraisal. Our board realizes that their funds are not usually the largest portion of a financial stack on a property. So they realize that those other organizations do a much deeper dive, and look harder at those documents than they do. And we'll go with that. So of course we want to see the appraisal, but we understand that if you're getting tax credits, they're looking at the appraisal too. Review of any due diligence items, anything that came up, execution of loan documents. So again, you got to work with me and our legal representatives at QTAC Rock to get those done. Payment of all expenses and receipt of a resolution adopted by the developer. So all of those things would be under conditions. That commitment letter requires an acceptance. It just depends on what we're looking at and the timeline for the development. Sometimes that acceptance has to be done within a short time. Sometimes it has to be done within 6 months. That acceptance can be by email, and usually I'm the one that hits you up for that, saying, you know, you didn't accept the terms yet. Can we get that done so we can start working on the closing stuff? That commitment letter typically expires within 12 months. Again, our board does not like to tie up funds for long periods of time. So we want to see that the development is up and running, that the closing has happened usually within that 12 months. And you must come back to the Housing Authority Board for any changes. So like I said, that commitment letter is going to say how many units are in that development and the income levels that you said were going to be there, has interest rate and amortization schedule all included. If any of that stuff changes, you have to come back to the board to get approval for that. So you have to ask yourself if you're ready to apply. So if you've got site control, that is awesome. If you have plans to get the site control, they'll look at that as well. If there are no zoning issues, we talked about that already, where we got a lot of neighbors that are complaining about zoning problems and tying up developments for a long time. So we want to make sure that there's no zoning issues going on. If you've got the environmental study done, again, we understand that the other funding sources are probably going to require that anyway. So if you've got that ready, we'd love to see it. And same is true with the market study and the development plans and the pro formas and all of that. We want to make sure that it's ready to go, and those things should be ready for the other funding anyways. And if it's applicable, if you've got a letter of an intent or an inducement resolution or something from those tax credits or private activity bonds to do, we realize that's, you know, half the development costs right there. So if you've got those things already in line, we want to see those letters as well. So let's look at the application. You can find it here at that link. It's on our website. And I have one here that I was toying with, that I highlighted a bunch of things that I wanted to point out in case you're interested in submitting one. So I just created a dummy organization, and we're going to build apartments, and those are my initials. It's my development, and I'm a for-profit developer, and I don't have a tax ID number just yet. This application is based off the LIHTC application. So if you're already submitting an application for tax credits, it looks very, very, very familiar. Some things to point out. Here's where it says when your projected closing is going to be. And again, our board likes to see that within the next 6 to 12 months. And the length of affordability. So they want to see if they're putting their money into development that it stays affordable for a certain period of years. And a lot of the other funds that we're seeing developments are using, those come with 30-year affordability periods. So we like to see that as well. Here, it's interesting, these things fill out based on what you say. Are you requesting housing trust fund? And of course it says yes here. If we clicked it to no, everything would disappear. So yes, we are, and there's all the notes there. This application can also be used for our private activity bonds. So the county has private activity bonds that are available, and if a development wants to apply for those, you use the exact same application. There's no sense in duplicating efforts here. But for this, since we're talking housing trust fund, we're just going to look at the housing trust fund part of it. You can see here the amount requested, 500,000 is typical. The interest rate, we've got a little note there you can hover over, and it says 2 to 3 is pretty typical, but they'll hear anything, or any request, I should say. Years, again, 18 to 30 is very typical, but flexible on that as well. Usually we want that to be a secured loan. There'll be some kind of deed and note attached to the property. Amortization, again, they want to see fully amortized usually. Some loans are paid only with cash flow. If the development can prove that they're making money, that's when they start paying back. Fully deferred, we usually don't like to see that one because, again, this is a revolving loan fund. We have to have that money coming back. Commitment expiration, again, we like to see within a year. And lien position, that is so that if something were to happen to the development, if they were to be foreclosed on for any reason, the Housing Authority Board likes to be in second place. We know we're not the biggest loan, but we like to be in second place, so that we get paid back if anything were to happen. Down here, you have to provide a brief summary of the project, some things to look at here. Tell us if you own the land or if you have any kind of plan to get control of that land. We want to see what the zoning is, so just lay it all out here in the description. We want to see income levels, so I put that in the description. If there's any vouchers or partnerships or other services that can be provided to the residents, put that in here. And the unit mix, they want to see how many bedrooms, how many, what the income is also, but how many are affordable out of those bedrooms would be nice as well. And then if there's any ADA accessible units, they want to see those too. Next, you give information on the developer. We want to know that you have experience doing this kind of stuff, that you know what you're doing with affordable housing, how to manage it, how to build it, that kind of thing. And then market studies. So we want to see those. We're assuming that you have to have one anyway for the other funding sources, so we would like to see it. And based on that market study, give us a little information about the area. And the rest is pretty self-explanatory. Down here it says, along with this application, go ahead and submit all of this stuff. And again, we realize you probably put it all together for the other funding sources. So if you would provide it to our Housing Authority Board as well, that would be amazing. The next tab over is the budget, and this you only fill out the yellow boxes. So I went ahead and filled that out for my apartments, and everything else populates already. This middle column here populates when you put in the next tab. So don't go getting concerned when you're putting information in here and nothing else is populating just yet. So just go ahead and put in all of these numbers based on your pro forma. You probably have that already done for the other funding sources anyway. And you can put in a couple extras here. If you've got different soft costs than what we've laid out, you can put some extras in there as well. Next tab is income and expenses. So you get to tell us, and we're really keen to know the number of bedrooms in your units and the income levels for those places. That tells us the maximum rent that you're going to be collecting on those units. Then you list over here your expenses for renting that place. They look at that pretty good as well. And once you fill all of that in, it populates this middle column and the far right column on this spreadsheet as well. Financing, they want to know where you're getting all the other funding for this development, because we realize the Housing Trust Fund loan is not the only piece of funding. So in this example, I didn't know who my conventional lender was going to be, but I did know we were going to get 2.65 mil for that, and the interest rate would be about 7%. So we want it laid out that at least you know what you're going to be asking for. Down here, you can put in all kinds of other different debt as well. Here's where we have tax credits. The El Paso County Housing Authority information fills out itself based on what you put in on that information page. That's awesome. Next is the pro forma. The one that we're looking for here, of course, is the Housing Authority repayment. So the Housing Authority Board is going to be looking at that with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that there is money in that development to pay them back every year. And the last one is sources and uses. All this is telling us these are the places you're planning to get the funding and what the status is. So they want to know that you're looking at getting a loan and you're planning to apply. And here's the Housing Authority and your application is pending, because here it is. This is the low-income housing tax credits, and it's committed. So if you would just go ahead and fill all of those out. And then we leave you a nice little tab at the end if you need to send us any special notes about any of this. And of course, a nice little instruction tab at the very front. So again, that application is on our website, so you can go ahead and download it. You can use it for the private activity bond application as well as HTF. You don't have to do it twice. You can do it all on the same application. Some tips and tricks: give as much information as possible. Give your documentation, your studies, your market stuff, your environmental stuff, everything that you've got. PowerPoints are not required, but they can be very helpful. I'm assuming they're going to be required if you're asked to come in for a presentation anyway, so it might help to get that done ahead of time. Have your financial stack sorted out the best you can, because again, they're going to be looking at that. And of course, if you have any questions, please ask. Here's my contact information in case you need to get a hold of me between now and the application deadline. No question is a bad question, and I love talking about developments, so I would love to discuss any projects that you have.